Oh, hey there everybody, it's Timmy, and today I'm going to show you how to install this Webasto ST2000 in this here camper. Welcome to Truck House Lab, baby. Alright y'all, so today we're going to be installing this diesel heater, which is the Webasto Airtop 2000 STC, in this camper back here, and I'm going to show you how to do it, and it's not as crazy as you think, so let's get to it. Alright, so when Webasto first sends you this big box, there's going to be all kinds of parts and wires and really intimidating stuff. Don't worry about it. Just pull all the stuff out, set it out, and don't get overwhelmed. So let's do that. So here's what I got in my Webasto kit. Obviously you get your heater, I got a fuel tank, I got some ducting hose so you can direct where the heat goes. You have your exhaust right here. So this is gonna go on the bottom of the heater right there, and exhaust slash vent outside of your car. This little hose is going to be your fresh air intake. This is going to be your fuel pump and all the stuff for it. This stuff is all your ducting and all the connections right there for your ducting. Get your fuel line right here. You get your fuel line that goes down into the tank right here. Looks like a little ducting cover, and your electrical harness, which looks crazy, but it's actually pretty simple. There's just like a couple of places you gotta plug things in, and it's all ready to go. So, and then finally your gasket to make sure that the Webasto seals tightly to the wall so no exhaust can come back in. And then your thermostats right here, which is pretty sweet. And finally, the mounting plate to mount the heater to the wall. All right, so the first thing you gotta do is find a location to mount the heater. So there's several different ways or orientations in which you can mount this Webasto air heater. So the most common way is to put it straight down onto your floor. And this is your air intake and exhaust ports, and it goes right out to the bottom of your car and exhausts out that way, and also pulls in fresh air that way. You can also mount it on the wall, so you can twist it on the side and then have your exhaust and fresh air intake go out the wall of your camper. And what I'm gonna be doing in this camper, I'm going to be mounting it vertically. So the Webasto is gonna be like this, and it's gonna be on the wall like this. So the exhaust is going out the wall, and it's a vertical mount. So you can mount it horizontally or vertically, as long as it's not upside down. I'm trying to exhaust that way, you can't do that. You can only twist the Webasto 90 degrees on its side or vertically. And if you do mount the Webasto vertically, make sure that the heat where it blows the air out is at the bottom. So make sure the heat is blowing down if you install it vertically. Let's get to it. All right, so in my case, I'm gonna be mounting the Webasto vertically, so like that. And it's going to be inside of my wall here, so pretty much right under the oven. So what I'm gonna do, this is where my old propane furnace was. I ripped the propane furnace out, and I'm gonna rebuild the wall right here. So here's my new wall. So this wall will be going pretty much just like that. And the Webasto is gonna be attached to the back side of this. So instead of screwing this down and having to try to install the Webasto inside, I'm just gonna go ahead and remove this panel that I'm gonna be installing the Webasto to, and put it right here. So it's nice and easy. And I'm going to kind of line the Webasto up where I want it on here, so let's do that. Now make sure when you mount your Webasto to the wall, wherever you're gonna mount it, or the floor, make sure you leave room for your air ducting tube to actually make the bend it needs to make to point the direction you want it to. You want the least amount of bends. So we're gonna mount it about right there. And so what we're gonna do is take this template and kind of line it up about where I've got the Webasto, so about right there. Right, so that's my spot. That's where I'm going to mount it. So now at this point, try to hold that template in place. I'm going to take a drill, and I'm going to drill some really tiny holes in the dead center of all these holes I have to drill. So let's do that. Let's do the big one first, right in the center. This 3/4 inch wall is a little bit too thick, so I just went ahead and cut a little oval out with a jigsaw where all those holes were before, and just makes it easier to get to everything now, so I think it's still fine. So the first thing we're gonna do is take this rubber gasket and put your fuel pump line through the rubber gasket, and then go ahead and slide that gasket all the way down firmly so it's planted onto the Webasto heater like so. Nice and tight. After you get the rubber gasket on, take your mounting plate, same thing, put your fuel pump wire through, drop that mounting plate right down onto the Webasto stove, and we're going to go ahead and secure that in place with the package of 4 nuts and washers it came with. Tighten these 10mm nuts up. At that point, your Webasto should be mounted to the mounting plate with that rubber gasket, nice and solid. Remember, you want your heating, the blower element, pointing down. So now you take your foam gasket, peel off the sticky part. You're going to put your fuel pump line through, set it down in the mounting plate. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and stick the bolts through to line it up nicely. Just put my bolts through, right there, and one on the bottom there. At this point, you can see I've got the Webasto, the rubber gasket, the mounting plate, the foam seal, and the 4 bolts that hold it in here. So now we're going to line it up with the wall where I'm mounting it. Pull that cord through. All right, I've got a 1/4 inch drill bit, so we're going to go through the mounting bolt holes all the way through the wood. Put a bolt through there to hold it in place, right? Once again, that's just kind of holding the place in the wood so all the holes line up here. Anyway, the bolts are all the way through, so let's get the nuts on here. So now I'm going to go ahead and tighten up the bolts and nuts that are holding the Webasto to the wall with a 7/16 box end wrench and a socket. Now at this point, you can tell the Webasto is firmly attached to what's going to be my wall. The Webasto heater has the small rubber seal, the mounting plate, the big soft foam piece that compresses against the wall, and the bolts that go all the way through. On the back side, you have your power that's going to go to your fuel pump, your exhaust tubes right there, and the fuel line. So now it's time to get to the next part. The stove is mounted and installed to the wall, so we're going to get the exhaust piping on there. So your exhaust is going to be the steel one right down here where all the nasty stuff comes out. So go ahead and put your exhaust tube on there and the clamp for it, and we're going to go ahead and tighten that up. And it's a 10mm nut to tighten up the exhaust clamp there. So now our exhaust tube is on. It's clamped down with the 10mm nut, and it's locked in nice and solid. All right, y'all, next thing we're gonna do is get the fuel line, the fitting on here. You need 2 of the mini hose clamps and your rubber fuel line. So you're gonna put the fuel line right on the fuel nipple right there. When you do that, you're gonna go ahead and take your hose clamps, put them on the rubber, and then we're going to go ahead and tighten these down. So now we're gonna put the combustion tube on, which is a short one right here, and the little hose clamp that came with it. First thing you want to do is make sure your fuel pump electrical wire is pushed down the slot right here. So see that little slot? Just kind of push it down and out of the way. That way the combustion pipe hose can go over. We're going to go ahead and tighten up this hose clamp. So now the combustion air intake is hooked up, the exhaust tube's hooked up, and the little fuel line nipple is on there and hooked up. So now let's move on to the next step. So now we'll take the plastic fuel line and we're going to insert that into the little rubber sleeve here and push it all the way till it touches the Webasto end of the fuel nipple. Then we're going to tighten up this little mini hose clamp. Next thing we'll do here is take off this little piece on top. Just pops right off. And inside of here is the plug, your electric plug. So we're going to go ahead and plug in the wiring harness so that's done and I don't have to mess with it in a tight spot. Your wiring harness is this big long harness. You're just going to take the largest connector on there and plug that right into your Webasto on the top here. And now let's go ahead and install the Webasto onto the wall where it's going to be. And the Webasto is just going to slide right into place in the wall. And I'm just going to screw this wall plate in place. All right, now our Webasto is firmly mounted to the wall. And we're ready to begin hooking up the fuel lines and getting the exhaust routed where I want it routed to. All right, my next step is I took that hole saw bit, the 1-inch bit, drilled a hole through my back porch, and I'm gonna put the combustion air right out through there. So now you guys can see I use that multi-tool to cut out a little larger area for that stainless steel exhaust pipe to go through and not touch any wood. That stainless steel exhaust tube is really hot and you don't want it touching any wood, especially within a foot of the exhaust like that. So I've got the stainless steel exhaust tube suspended, so it's not touching anything. I just got like a little nut to space it out in the back and the little hose clamp bracket that came with it. So, and under the bottom where the exhaust is poking through, you can tell it's not touching any wood. How about that? So it's important to install the exhaust tube pointing outwards and just downish a little bit. That way you're not getting exhaust pulling up under your camper. So we're gonna take this little clamp right here and we're gonna be mounting it to the inside of the porch here. And for good measure, let's get one more up under here to hold it in place. And just like that, exhaust goes down through the floor right there on the side of the camper, so you can kind of see how it's sticking out a little bit. Ideally, you can have the exhaust tube and the air intake tube point downwards. If they go flat or go upwards at any point within their run, you have to poke a tiny hole in the exhaust line kind of at the lowest point for condensation to drip through. Get everything pretty much ready to go. Everything's been silicone, so it's watertight. And the next thing we're gonna do is take our fuel pump and put one of the little connectors on the end of it. And we're gonna take our fuel filter. The fuel is gonna be flowing this way towards the 90-degree bend there. And on your fuel filter, find that little arrow and make sure it's pointing in the direction the fuel is flowing, which is this way. Go ahead and put your hose clamps on. And we'll insert that fuel filter in the direction the fuel is flowing there. All right, and we'll go ahead and tighten that up. Now that the fuel filter is tightened up to the fuel pump, we're gonna go ahead and put the hanger on. When you put this hanger on, you want it hanging vertically. And when you put the fuel pump bracket on that holds the fuel pump on the wall, it's rubber and it's gonna absorb the vibration of the fuel pump. So you wanna make sure it's mounted kind of vertically where it can hang like that and suspend the fuel pump. And there you have it. Now you can see it's gonna hang about like that on the wall. So we'll install this on the wall at this point. So this end is going to go to your fuel tank. This end is gonna go to the Webasto. So make sure the Webasto end of it, the 90-degree bend, is pointing up. All right, then as you can see here, the fuel pump is now mounted with this rubber bracket, like so. So that'll help keep the vibration down to a minimum. So our next move is to take the fuel line, which is going into the Webasto, and cut it to go into this 90-degree bend end of the fuel pump right there. So let's do that. All right, so we just cut the fuel line. Now we're gonna fix it to this. All right, so we're gonna slip a little sleeve on here. Once you get that sleeve slipped on, go ahead and slip you a couple of small hose clamps over the top. And we're going to insert this line in here. We're gonna go ahead and tighten up the hose clamps now. All right, so the next thing you're gonna do once that fuel pump is installed, you're gonna go ahead and take your fuel pump wiring connector. It's this little guy right there. And go ahead and connect the fuel pump to that. Pop it into place. Then you're gonna come down to the other end of your wiring harness. And remember, this wire right here is what comes out of the heater. Go ahead and plug that wire that comes out of the heater into your fuel pump wiring harness. So really simple, just like that. So all I have to do now is I've got to connect the fuel tank to this line right here, and then this side is totally done. So now you can see the fuel line is coming out of the Webasto diesel heater and running into the 90-degree bend in the fuel pump. And now we need to get this fuel line attached to the fuel tank, which will be sitting right here in the porch. So now we're gonna take another sleeve and put it on the end of the fuel pump here. Go ahead and clamp that down into place. The next thing we're gonna do is get the diesel tank ready for the fuel lines. So we're gonna drill a hole in the top of the fuel tank, just big enough for this 90-degree thread to get through. And then we have to tighten up the nut from inside the tank. And whatever kind of tank you have, just see how far you can kind of reach your fingers to hold a nut right in there, so I can't get too far, right in there. And I'm gonna use a 3/16 drill bit. And these little fuel lines are all different sizes, so make sure your drill bit's going to work for that thread. So we get our little hole drilled right there. At that point, we're gonna take the line, and be careful when you unbend this. You don't wanna bend it too much. Unbend it, and I might have to trim it. You usually want this really close to the bottom of the tank. I need to trim it just a little bit there. So when you cut the stainless steel fuel line, make sure to use a hacksaw to cut it. So we're gonna take this fuel line, stick it in this hole, and you gotta try to thread that nut from inside the gas can. So it could get really interesting. Okay, got that. And there's that little rubber grommet on top. Okay, you gotta make sure to hold on to that nut so it doesn't fall. And there you have it, nozzle's on there, and now we can connect the Webasto fuel line directly to this. So we got the box rebuilt. You can see everything's all ready to go back here. We have the fuel pump electric all hooked up and tied to the inside. The exhaust are safely running through, and the intake is safely pulling air where it needs to, and it's all good to go. So now we're going to mount this fuel tank. So all you have to do is take these 3 self-tapping screws, put them through these holes, and mount the tank wherever you want. So we're gonna mount the tank right here, so it's nice and easy to fill up. So let's do that. All right, we've got the 3 self-tapping screws going through the fuel tank, and we're gonna mount it to the wall right down here. So let's do that. All right, the fuel tank is installed, nice and tight. Now the final step outside is to connect this fuel line that's going into the fuel tank up to the fuel pump hose right there. So let's do that real quick. So all we're gonna do on this part is take the fuel line that came with the kit. We're gonna take a little hose clamp and put it over the little fuel filter line right there. We're gonna go ahead and take this fuel line and push it all the way in until it meets the other fuel line. You should feel them kind of touch each other and bottom out. At that point, we're gonna tighten that hose clamp up. Now we're gonna run this fuel line. We're gonna cut it the appropriate length so it fits into the fuel tank right here. So let's say about right in there. All right, then the final step is to take the fuel line that's coming from the fuel pump and go ahead and plug that right into the tank line right there. So let's get a hose clamp over that and get that fuel line in. When you put these fuel lines in, make sure they're all the way down to where they're touching. Go ahead and tighten the hose clamp up. And there you have it. Everything is nicely connected. Fuel pump's all hooked up. Exhaust is through where it needs to be. Looks nice and clean, and there's still room, plenty of room in my box here. The main wiring harness is plugged into the heater. So now, all I have to do is run the positive and negative from this big wiring harness straight to a battery. So what I have to do now is crimp on these little terminal connectors to the end of the positive and negative wire, like so, and put those on a battery. So let's do that. All right, and here we have our Webasto digital controller. So I got the digital one so I can program it. So all you have to do with this thing, pull it out of the box, pull it on out of all the packaging. All it is your thermostat and a plug. Super easy. And you just have to mount this to the wall however you want to. So all you do is take your thermostat and the plug at the end of it, just plug it into the end of your wiring harness. Clicks into place, and there you go. Thermostat's ready to go. I just need to mount it to the wall somewhere, but we're just gonna test the system first. And now the last thing we're gonna do is take this hot air ducting and put a hose clamp over it and put the end connecting guy on it, the faceplate. Slide this hose clamp up and lock this faceplate up to the air ducting. All right, now the faceplate is attached to the air ducting with that hose clamp right there. So now we're going to take the other end of the air ducting and put it on the bottom of the Webasto, put a hose clamp on it, and connect it all together. We'll get some diesel in the fuel tank, put a couple gallons in there. I think it's like a 2.5 gallon tank maybe. All right, so let's hook the Webasto up to power. Here's my positive terminal and my negative terminal. All right, y'all, here we go, moment of truth. Just hook the positive and negative up to the battery. Everything's ready to go. I've never even used this thing before. Guess I'm just gonna go to a menu, set the time. Let's go ahead and do that, I guess. And I think I hear it turning on. You guys hear that? This is the pump going. Oh my goodness, guys. Oh my goodness, we're in business. It's blowing air. I'm excited, I'm telling you what. And there you have it. We've got heat. It's blowing hot air. Ain't that beautiful? Pretty powerful fan. Like, it's enough to blow that around. That is nice and toasty warm. I am stoked. So I'm gonna reinstall the oven, get all my lithium-ion batteries and all that stuff down in there eventually, but we're good to go, bro. Yeah. And this little thermostat has 2 little screws, so I'll probably just mount it right there to the faceplate. The new fuel pump is actually pretty quiet too. It's like a tiny click. Our exhaust. Well, hope you guys enjoyed that video. Hopefully the video showed you how to install the Webasto stove. It's really not crazy. It looks really intimidating when it first comes in the box to you, but it's not too bad. Just take your time with it, and everything makes sense when you start looking at stuff and watch a couple videos like this. So if you guys did enjoy the video, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy how-to content and adventure content. I do new videos every week, so see you next time.